There is a pile in my house that has moved around a few times. It started on the armoire in the front hall. It contains a torn yellow ribbon that accidentally went through the washing machine, a wrinkled photocopy of a kidnapped poster with a strike-through that reads "Released." A small Israeli flag that we'd been using as a part of a memorial that lost its miniature flagpole. When I clean one surface of my home, I sort of sweep these into a pile and then move them to the next available horizontal surface. Frankly, I don't know what to do with it all. With the tangible reminders that half of my heart is still living in the East. Throwing it all away feels callous. But I'm not sure if or what or how long I want to keep any of it. What are you supposed to do with the little things that have brought you hope, that have sustained your faith? Each Tuesday, I spend the first half of my time with the 7th grade Jewish learning community, Hebrew school students, learning about ritual creation, asking questions like this one. The second half of our time together, we jointly run a mock Shabbat Torah service. One week, just a few minutes into the service, I heard, "Oh my God, Cantor, Chorny." That was my 7th grade student squealing at me from across the room. "Oh my God, wait, can I say, oh my God, I'm so sorry." I tried not to laugh, taking her very seriously. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "So wrong," she said, pointing at the pages of her siddur. "Someone wrote all over this prayer book." I braced myself as I walked over to her seat. I've seen some pretty eyebrow-raising stuff sketched by clever Hebrew school kids in my day. I was a Hebrew school kid myself who may have from time to time made occasionally bad choices about leaving my mark on synagogue property, and I'll point out that I turned out okay. But this book, it hadn't been defaced. Up and down the page, and as I flipped through the siddur, I saw throughout this whole service and the next, there were personal notes, stage directions, notes to self about where to bow, where to step backwards, to slow down and, quote, smile more, all of them in pencil. I could tell it was a kid's handwriting. It was probably a few months out from their bat mitzvah. It was a glimpse into the mindset of the prayer leader who was using that siddur to learn how to lead. "This is amazing," I said. "It is?" my students asked me. "Oh, absolutely," I replied. "It's like someone froze time and sliced off a moment in history." We gathered around the siddur and I gingerly turned the pages like it was a museum relic full of memories. One of the students turned to me very seriously and said, "I think we're supposed to bury it." I saw a shovel out on the field. I could probably do it real quick. Should I go get it, or? When I was a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary, I spent the first year in Israel, and then I returned for my second year to the august campus in Morningside Heights at the top of Manhattan. It's not quite Hogwarts at 3080 Broadway, but it is kind of mystical and full of dusty, important books. No place was dustier than the huge library where I'd often lose myself on long, boring afternoon breaks. During the orientation week, we were given a tour of the rare book room. It was a really cool place. To view just one set of materials in that room, he had to sign an extensive waiver and then wait 15 days and promise all kinds of good behavior. The holdings are museum pieces, 100 plus years of precious collections. Some are fragments, some are manuscripts, tens of thousands of unique Haggadot, hundreds upon hundreds of unique pages of Talmud from around the world. I want to tell you about the second most interesting thing I learned on that tour. But to earn your attention, I'll first tell you about the most interesting thing that I learned on that tour. In 1966, a terrible fire devastated the old library at JTS, destroying a lot of its holdings. In response to that, the rare book room was outfitted with a particularly relentless emergency protective system. So as they're lecturing us, they said, if you happen to be in the rare book room in the event of a fire, you have exactly 60 seconds to leave before all the oxygen is cut to that space. I eyed the emergency exit staircase and then the nearest desk to that staircase, and I thought, well, that'll be my spot when I visit. Now, the second most interesting thing I learned on that visit was that JTS possessed more than 30,000 fragments from the Cairo Geniza, the attic space where the Jewish community stored objects that were damaged or no longer useful, but because of their level of holiness. Like, for example, the full Hebrew name of God was written on that parchment or that paper or that cloth. It couldn't just be thrown into the garbage. In 1896, twin Scottish sisters, not you, there are Scottish sisters in 1896, but they were other Scottish sisters. They came across some ancient scrolls at an Egyptian market. Like the start of an Indiana Jones epic, they brought their finds to a scholar, Solomon Schechter, whom they personally described as irrepressibly curious, which is a compliment if I ever heard one. Schechter headed to the Ben Ezra Synagogue in Old Cairo, where he saw firsthand the incredible preserved Geniza of the community. There were around 400,000 texts stored still in the Cairo Geniza. Some dated back more than 1,200 years. Many of the manuscripts were marked up and replete with, my favorite word, marginalia. Scribbles in the margins, doodling on the edges, notes people had made in between page breaks. And in a sort of Dan Brown meets National Treasure story, archivists have used marginalia to solve huge textual mysteries. Historical societies band together to finish work on things like, for example, a Bakasha of Nachmanides, also known as the Ramban. He was a great sage in the Iberian Peninsula some 800 years ago, and he wrote an introduction to his personal prayers on the occasion of 800 years ago, a little less recently than Mark's bar mitzvah, but also on Parshat Bereshit. The fractals of sacred fragments spanning the centuries took generations to decode, but with the aid of many hand-sketched bits of marginalia, we get to revisit this gorgeous, timeless, raw, holy poem on this same parsha that we read this week. Here it is. Please, O Lord, who creates without having a creator, and who conceived a thought and power from potential to action, brought forth light which illuminates all the lights from beginning until the end for all of the illuminations. The words of God are pure words. Please, with your unseen, refined, and pure power, establish my thoughts in your service, in awe, in trembling, and in reverence. You have brought to light every mystery. Make me wise to know your commandments, and as a hawk soars over its prey, allow me to understand and guide me in the path of your commandments. And in the ways of tshuva, repentance, instruct me, because you are a God who desires the repentance of the wicked, and the spirit of grace flows forth on those who know and on those who do not know. and in the attribute of your beloved ones from ancient times, bless me with sublime favor as my absolute light. And this is your favor that you will do for me. And may I not tremble in fear of you, and raise me up on the balance of grace, and guide me in your truth, and fulfill me from its delights, and from their great light enlighten me. And like the mountain of your inheritance in Jerusalem, bring me and plant me, and between two cherubim, may your word come and console me, and desire me, and receive me. And may the foundation of your world establish my soul, and may it be bound up in the bundle of life, the pure soul that you have placed within me, and in the great all-encompassing crown may it be included. Include me in your exalted attribute of goodness with every blessing and splendor. Please with these crowns, which are 10 in number, and in them lay the secret to everything. May my supplication come before you, and may your ear be inclined to my joy, and may my prayer come before the sanctuary of your holiness. And from the good oil of the 2 olives and the wellspring, pour upon the 7 candles of the entirely good menorah, and shower upon the one who longs for your kindness and sees your goodness through spiritual channels from higher wellsprings and lower wellsprings. And you are the one who knows that I do not unburden my plea before you due to my righteousness, but rather by the merit of my ancestors I have based it, and by the greatness of your mercy and your humility and the memory of your 13 attributes. Written by Nachmanides 800 years ago for this same parasha. All this brings me back to that siddur in Pilch Hall with the pencil writing and the bow here and the turn the page there. It's so Jewish, I told my students. I tell my students every chance I get, when you own a book, please write in the margin. Writing in the margin always bodes potential for the start of a treasure hunt in the distant future. Someone many generations from now could get a glimpse of your thoughts, of your questions, your annotations, your gloss on the text. They'll see themselves in you and them. Think how grateful they'll be to know you intimately, your intentions and concerns and desires, how they'll wonder if you forgot your book, this book, how they'll wonder if you forgot where to bow, or much more likely, if you've learned it all, head to toe, heart and soul, and you don't need your marginalia or your book anymore. This is, of course, only possible in the case that we can go back and see what we've tucked away in a geniza. We can't always do that because we use the word geniza to conflate 2 different and very important categories of sacred storage, one of which is that we've buried the stuff and it's gone. Every community takes responsibility for the construction and preparation of a kosher burial site for geniza materials, which is a task for which there's a significant related body of Jewish law. Geniza also refers to the holding place, the resting space, the accessible, reachable, finite space where we put our materials that we're supposed to take care of, but we haven't gotten to yet. We collect, and that collection sometimes grows and grows and grows until that collection, pre-geniza, becomes what we call a geniza unto itself. That's what the Cairo geniza was, an utter treasure trove, unspoiled by the elements or any kind of profound organic decay. A slice of proof and explanation of existence that could be sampled and cored by discerning and, quote, irrepressibly curious future Jews and scholars like us. In both cases, a geniza is where we bring the stuff that we used in service of God, and the stuff that's adjacent to those categories that we simply can't bear to throw in a trash can because it just feels too weird. Like a kippah with a big tear in it, like a challah cover, a soft stuffed lulav and etrog set for a toddler that's stained beyond usefulness. These things call out to us for a dignified end, something that mirrors the dignity with which they were wielded in the world, like those tattered yellow ribbons in my pile, the crumpled kidnap posters that we pulled down with relief when we heard someone came home, like the special yahrzeit candle that burned so long there's no wax left to give. Last month, I got a call from someone named Craig Dershowitz at Artists for Israel. Rabbi Kligfeld made the connection Craig and his buddies in the tattoo business were the artistic minds behind the giant mural of kidnap posters that's lined a building in Culver City for a year since October 7th. It's kind of miraculous that it stayed up there the whole time unscathed, he said. And now that it's time to take the whole thing down, he felt torn because the images of the same types of posters being torn off of street lamps and walls is a very haunting recent memory of anti-Semitic vandalism. We talked for a long while about what the posters mean, what they meant, what they've done this past year, how we wanted to do something to thank them for the way they've served the Los Angeles Jewish population, how they had been a signal of our distress, a prayer for hope, a plea for peace, wishes and hopes and dreams of people coming home and staying home safe and sound. Craig explained that the mural would come down in bits and pieces. It's just the nature of that kind of art. So we hatched a plan to collect those fragments so that they could be buried in a shroud, in a geniza, not just shelved, but put into the ground to return to the earth. Next to them, we'd put intact posters of the captives who have died, a gesture of sorrowful solidarity, returning them too to the earth. And finally, a keepsake box, a time capsule, a place where those little items, anything small enough to fit folded in the palm of your hand, those two can be placed up to 3 per family we figure we can fit. We'd return all those things to the soil in our garden, the keepsake box, the only piece that will resist decomposition. We set a date, November 4th this year, just a few weeks, and we began to craft a ceremony for this geniza emplacement. And then we added more art to the event. Craig and his team came to Pressman Academy and worked with dozens of students to create new spray paint street art on canvases representing new life and new art for a new year. It's the very first exhibit that will go up in our new Cafe Hatikva to be unveiled that same night, November 4th. In that exhibit, we'll have an open acrylic collectible box where we hope people will place tokens of hope that they are not yet ready to bury. We'll also use that collectibles box to gather handwritten notes and prayers. We welcome anyone to use this opening of both versions of Geniza, the earthbound emplacement and the above-ground time capsule and storage, to ritualize a transition into a new year and a new lease on a relationship with Israel, with the war, with your own sense of hope. You can bring any kind of totem within the listed size guidelines, anything that brings you catharsis through that letting go. Among the many things that will welcome the night of November 4th will be emplacing wood from Jonathan York's Sukkah art project at the Skirball Center, which he called Forest Majeure, in which he built a sukkah utilizing lumber from the embattled kibbutz Be'eri. Now that wood too will rest in our Geniza. The list is endless, and no one person or community's totems are the same as the next. Your pile might look like the one on my dresser or not. And someday, it's possible and permissible and thrilling and wrenching to imagine that people might dig up the box that we put all the way into the earth in the Geniza. And I wondered and thought about speaking with my own 7th grade students about this very following question. Can we bury in the Geniza if we intend for the contents to be unearthed after some time? Or is it simply permissible to explore the contents if we happen across them, like those Scottish sisters and Solomon Schechter, and they're incidentally unscathed? The laws of Geniza outline the reasons for which we should not mark where a Geniza is buried. Not because it cannot be unearthed, but because it cannot and should not be disgraced. And it might be, if someone were to find it. But the time capsule that will go into the Geniza in our garden, that's meant to elevate, to take items that have been debased or disfigured or damaged, and to restore dignity. Not only can we intentionally set about making for ourselves a time capsule of a Geniza, or that it will be unearthed or uninterred or restored to the top of the soil for future examination, we must. Whether in the form of digital archives or physically archived spaces, or ideally both, we are planting bulbs of evidence that will bloom into the stories to which future generations will bear witness. In this week, celebrating the genesis of the earth ex nihilo, a God who creates without having a creator, we're poised to look at the great potential of our messy expanse and organize it bit by bit, ritual by ritual. We'll start with a shovel. There are, in fact, a few out there on the field. We'll see you on November 4th. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.